NBC's Monica Alba is joining us from the White House. Vaughn Hilliard is on the road in North Carolina, where Trump is set to hold a rally later today. And also with us, Tolu Olorunnipa, White House bureau chief for The Washington Post. So, Monica, it's going to be a speech for the history books tonight. What are we learning about it?
Yeah, and this will be an Oval Office address from President Biden, Anna, just a week and a half after he gave his last one, which was about the assassination attempt on Donald Trump's life. But tonight, this will really be about almost the entirety of Joe Biden's life in public service. He is really going to be trying to detail in real specifics why he decided to leave the 2024 race when he did. He's going to try to pull back the curtain a little bit, we're told, on his thinking, and then, of course, why he decided to so quickly endorse his vice president, Kamala Harris, to become the Democratic nominee, they hope. But then he's also going to try to lay out a roadmap for what he sees as possible accomplishments that are still outstanding in these last 6 months. And so he's going to try to frame that as there's more work to do. Remember that his State of the Union address message had been finish the job. And so now he's going to argue that even if he's not going to be finishing that in another term, there's still more to accomplish and more he's going to try to set up for Democrats, though we have to acknowledge that a lot of that is really difficult given how close we are to the election and given where Congress is right now. But we know that there had been some other things floated, like potential reforms or proposals he could introduce to the Supreme Court, for instance. And there are other things in that category that they are now probably going to lean into a little more heavily. But I was also told by somebody that this is really a speech for President Biden to acknowledge something he has talked about a lot in the last couple of years, which is that he's a respecter of fate, and there will certainly be some introspection in this speech as well in prime time tonight. Anna.
Tolu, what do you think the final months of Biden's presidency will look like, and whether he'll play a role in the Harris campaign?
Well, he has already said that he wants to play a role, that he will be doing events and talking about how the Biden-Harris administration has delivered for the American people. So I do expect to see him on the campaign trail. But these last 6 months or so of his presidency, he's going to be a lame duck. We just have to put it out there. That's the truth. He's going to have less focus on him. He will still have the power of the presidency. I expect to see a number of executive orders and him taking action to do things that he hasn't done in the first 3.5 years of his presidency. He's unshackled a little bit because he doesn't have to think about political calculations as he makes these decisions, but he's going to have a less of a spotlight on him. People are going to be turning their focus to his vice president, to his number two, and she's going to be, for all intents and purposes, the leader of the Democratic Party. So it'll be a very interesting position that he's in as the head of the country, as the leader of the free world, but not the number one person in his party anymore. And so that's going to be a difficult position for him to navigate over the next 6 months.
Yep. So much focus will be on the vice president instead. Now, candidate Harris, as she embarks on this presidential campaign. She's heading to Indiana today, Monica. She has just weeks to find a running mate. What do we know about her today?
Yeah, totally compressed timeline on that front. So she's going to be juggling that while trying to really lay out the theory of her case for why she wants to earn and win this nomination. And we've seen a bit of a preview of that over the last couple of days when she's given speeches talking about this in the frame of her history as a prosecutor, as a former attorney general, and really taking that to Donald Trump in that specific way. But she's also trying to talk about this from a contrast and a larger view and perspective in terms of how she will approach a term in the White House as president. Listen to how she put that.
A future where no child has to grow up in poverty, where every worker has the freedom to join a union, will stop Donald Trump's extreme abortion bans because we trust women to make decisions about their own body and not have their government tell them what to do.
And as you can really clearly hear there, that was a raucous crowd. It was the largest assembled, Anna, of any now Harris campaign, but formerly Biden campaign event to date this cycle. So that tells you a little bit about the energy and the enthusiasm here. And the Harris campaign is touting this morning they've been able to raise more than $126 million since the president's announcement that he was going to exit the race. And they're also touting really high levels of new voter registrations evidence of volunteers and of people applying to work for the campaign, again, in a sign of a real quick turn for some of those staffers who had experienced a really dour and difficult couple of weeks after the president's poor debate performance.
Yeah, we're hearing that there have been literally tens of thousands of people on calls and wanting to volunteer and wondering how they can get involved, can donate. We're tracking all of that. Obviously, we're also trying to keep track of this truncated timeline for a vice presidential pick should Harris become the official nominee. Monica, what's the latest reporting in terms of the thinking and strategy in choosing a running mate?
And before all of this, Democrats were working with this potential August 7th deadline for a virtual roll call to formally nominate the presidential and vice presidential nominees ahead of the convention in Chicago on August 19th. Now we know that there are some conversations about really trying to get Vice President Harris's potential running mate locked in and around that same time period. But we are told the virtual roll call could start a little earlier in August. It could start sometime around August 1st. So there's some thinking that she really has about 2 weeks here to go through this entire process. We know that there are already at least 5 names who have received some vetting materials, a couple of governors who we've discussed, including Senator Mark Kelly, Governor Tim Walz, Governor Gretchen Whitmer, Governor Roy Cooper, Governor Josh Shapiro, as you see on your screen there. Some of them have really said that they are not necessarily interested in that job. And then there are a couple of others who are under active discussion, like Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg and Kentucky's Governor Andy Beshear, who are also in the mix and in this conversation. But I think compared to other years, because of these extraordinary events, this will just be done so much faster. And so that is a challenge. But also, in some ways, the Democrats that I've spoken with think that that will be something they can use to their advantage, again, on the enthusiasm argument, because they think they'll try to roll some of this momentum directly into then naming a potential running mate here.
And if we could put that graphic with the potential picks back up on the screen, our reporting from Yamiche Alcindor, according to 2 sources familiar with the Harris campaign thinking, is that they're focusing on picking a VP running mate who can speak directly to older white voters and suburban women voters, specifically about issues like crime and abortion and the economy, and really defend Harris against voters who may be uncomfortable voting for a Black and South Asian woman. And so that's part of the thinking we're learning about. Meantime, Vaughn, tonight will be former President Trump's first rally since the dramatic shift in the Democratic ticket, but we're also starting to see an emerging strategy against his new opponent. What are we hearing from the former president?
Right. It was actually on Saturday night at his rally in Grand Rapids, Michigan, when he asked the more than 12,000 in the crowd at that rally who they wanted to face. And he essentially had everybody cheer when he said Joe Biden and cheer when he said Kamala Harris. And the overwhelming favorite that they wanted to face was Joe Biden. But within hours, come Sunday morning, it was made clear that that was not who they were going to get the chance to run against anymore. Instead, it was going to be Kamala Harris. And so far, what you have heard from Donald Trump are mean-spirited attacks, name-calling of Kamala Harris that there's no need to repeat here. But he, over the last 24 hours, has refocused some on actual policy, and that includes her role overseeing in 2021, based off the administration's request, to oversee her coordination with Mexico and the Northern Triangle countries to try to better help stem the flow of immigrants into the United States. But then also he repeatedly, on a call yesterday, a background phone call, he repeatedly suggested that Kamala Harris should not get away with not being directly tied to Joe Biden and the Biden administration, that she was just as responsible for the policies that came out of that White House for the last 3.5 years. And so for Kamala Harris, another strain of this is her 2019 presidential bid, when she was competing against Joe Biden, but also more than 20 other Democratic candidates at the time. And we have already seen in one campaign ad by Dave McCormick, the Senate candidate in Pennsylvania, going back and playing some of those old clips of hers. Donald Trump has called her the liberal from San Francisco. And so he and his campaign are going to try to make her out to be even less mainstream than Joe Biden.